This podcast is a proud member of Pod Nation Media Network.
Flicker of reels, the shadows crawl. Curtains rise, a ghostly sprawl. The frames are whispers, the stories call. The drifters hum in a hollow tune. Moonlight cuts through velvet gloom. Is it a dream or a real too soon? Step into the screen where the dark turns keen. Journey with the cinephile, unseen, unseen. The veils twist and turn as the silent light burns. A world unknown where the shadows yearn.
Hello and welcome, listeners, to Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast, where we take a deep dive into the world of horror cinema, from the eerie classics to the latest spine-chilling releases. Join me as I explore the history, themes, and artistry of horror one film at a time. Whether you're a seasoned horror fan or just stepping into the shadows, this journey is for you. So dim the lights, embrace the fear, and let's talk horror. And let's do that here on episode 319. I'm your tour guide of David Garrett Jr., recording out of Columbus, Ohio. So for this one here is going to be my winter year-end number 28 of episodes of doing this type of stuff here. And the two featured reviews I'm going to be doing are going to be Night of the Reaper and The Chill Factor. So this one kind of makes for an interesting little double feature here, is that the new movie here, Night of the Reaper from 2025, is a period piece set in like the 1980s and, using VHS tapes as an element, where the latter, The Chill Factor, is actually the tail end of that era and made its debut on that type of format, so kind of a cool thing there. And then for mini reviews here, I have The Fear from 1995. This is a Voyage to the Fives rewatch. And then I got to rewatch Him. This one is one that I saw in the theaters, kind of wanted to see what I thought, letting everything settle and everything like that. I have a screener I got to check out of Evidence of the Boogeyman. And then Jamie and I finally got around to watching my 4K of Sinners. And then the last thing that I'll be doing here for mini reviews is going to be Dawn of the Dogman. This is a documentary that I got to check out as a screener as well. Another one from Small Town Monsters and Seth Breedlove. So I don't think there's anything else I need to do here for this intro outside of saying thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy coming on this journey with me.
Are you looking for a movie podcast with deep dives, interviews, and thoughtful film analysis?
We ain't got none of that. What do we got?
You want to hold the bucket?
Right, I'll hold the bucket, sit in the cuff
chair.
chair.
There I will never blink. I'll just be there holding the bucket.
I will never blink on her
drapes, most likely. You look like a drape jizzer. R.I.P. that sweet, sweet pussy. It is known that Jessica Tandy had the sweetest pussy in Hollywood. If you don't know, Google it. Don't Google Jessica Tandy's pussy, you guys. Don't do it. Don't do it.
Doom Generation. Available anywhere you find podcasts.
Are you tired of the coffee crash? Still jittery an hour after your morning cup of coffee? Listen. I used to drink 5, 6, 7 cups a day to just keep going. The anxiety, the stomach pains, the afternoon crash, it was brutal. Then I discovered Rise Coffee, and everything changed. Rise has less than half the caffeine as regular coffee, but here's the magic. It contains 6 organic mushrooms, including cordyceps, lion's mane, and others that naturally sustain your energy without the jitters or crash. We're talking sharper focus, immune support, better gut health, and calm, sustained energy that lasts all day. Plus, it's organic, vegan, and has 0 added sugars. Unlike other mushroom coffees, Rise is USA grown in California. A full spectrum of mushrooms per serving that actually works. Here at Pod Nation, we only partner with brands we actually believe in, and Rise Coffee is the real deal. Head to risesuperfoods.com and use promo code PODNA15 for 15% off your order. That's PODNA 15 for 15% off. Ditch the crash. Fuel your day the right way with Rise Coffee.
And for my first mini review is going to be The Fear from 1995, directed by Vincent Robert, and it was written by Ron Ford and Greg H. Sims. I think they actually came up with the story together as well. And then this is starring Eddie Bowes, Heather Medway, and Ann Turkle. This is a horror film from the United States. It is currently sitting on a 3.9 on IMDb and a 2.2 on Letterboxd or Cinephile. A group of college students spend a weekend at a cottage for a psychological experiment called fear therapy. They find a human-sized wooden figure called Morty, which triggers everybody's deepest and darkest secrets and emotions. So go ahead and say Morty is actually portrayed by Eric Weiss, and I'll come back to this because it actually makes for a kind of creepy element for this. But this is a film that I remember seeing at the video store, but I never took it home. The case always stuck with me. So it was after college when I was still getting like Netflix DVDs through the mail that I ended up, getting this to check it out, because it's one of those, like, around that era and in college, I was seeking out all these films that I'd always kind of wanted to see that kind of stuck with me, and that was one of these. So I had only seen it once, picked it up on DVD quite a few years ago, so I'm revisiting it now as a voyage through the fives. And what I'm going to go ahead and start by saying is that we actually have an interesting concept. Not necessarily new, because it's borrowing a lot of its elements from other things. So one of those would be the haunting, because that whole premise there is where they go to this remote place and they are doing an experiment with fear. Or at least, not this one, they actually know it. I'm pretty sure in the haunting that they don't know that's what they're there for. I think it's more of just like a kind of therapy thing. But anyways, the incorporation of Morty seems to be borrowed something from Pin and even some elements from like Creepshow 2. Then the idea of isolating a group in a cabin, making it difficult to get away, has been used countless times. Regardless of reusing unoriginal ideas, there's some good stuff here. I'm going to start with the use of Morty. He's a focal point on the poster. This section needs tightening up. Morty is a figurehead. He works. There's this element of voyeurism, as he's always watching and listening. So the guy who's running the experiment is Richard, portrayed by Bowes, and he actually gets joined here by his Uncle Pete, portrayed by Vince Edwards. Now, they mentioned the grandfather got this for his general store where it displayed clothes. An American Indian carved it from special, possibly magical wood, and it seems like they're almost using it as like a golem. We see a sequence where he might be possessing a character as well. So my concern is the characters and for the audience seeing Morty move. I interpret this as not truly happening, but the plot muddles this with unrelated dark secret reveals. This disconnect is my issue with the totem's supposed power. I do like that Vice is in makeup, and because that's unnerving. He is able to stay still, moving ever so slightly, so there's that weird feeling that you're like, oh my god, is he alive? That's something I'll give credit for, and also like having real eyes, because he's a person, makes it even more creepy. I think I want to explore what works as the characters and their past. So Richard's trauma, his mother's disappearance, makes him interesting. He's plagued by a nightmare and doesn't plan to confront it. He is only pushed to participate after his good friend of Troy, who is portrayed by Darren Heems, challenges him. A key word sticks with him until his girlfriend of Ashley, portrayed by Medway, clarifies its meaning. He must release his burden as it isn't his fault. The truth is revealed, which is effective. It also explains his fear, which is commitment. I found Bowes to be a fine lead, carrying his damage well. So let's go over to his friend then of Troy. He is a person of interest, as there's been these attacks on the campus where they're college students due to him dating the latest victim. As they had a past relationship. They haven't, sounds like, had many interactions since then, but, he still knew her. And this is a rapist. There is a deep-seated issue that is explored through his much older sister of Leslie, portrayed by Turkle. There are issues, writing here that I have. Something gets revealed, then gets ignored, only to circle back. My guess is that continuity didn't catch it, and due to filming scenes most likely out of order, neither did the editor. Seeing things that Troy does make sense in the end. I thought that Heems portrays it well. So let's delve into the other themes I noticed. Morty gains power as fears and secrets are revealed. That's a good metaphor. The reoccurring nightmare can be seen as Freudian, supported by a book that is in the cabin's library, fitting Richard's guilt over his mother and the loss of his innocence. The unethical experiment where Richard shifts from being an observer to participant, and the hidden guilt or like skeletons in the closet is also kind of a key element here. That should be enough for the story. Let's go over to the actor performances. I said Bowes was fine as our lead, and the underutilized Medway is actually a key to this whole story. Ashley is a rock character due to her interactions. I thought Turkle and Heems, they show good chemistry with him delivering a strong performance. Edwards grows in importance as the story unfolds. I'd also give credit here to Anna Karen and Hayward, and that would end up being Leland Hayward III. They had actually some unexpected development for being, kind of minor characters. Antonio Todd and Monique Mannon, Their elements feel odd. I would say Vice adds effective eeriness, and we also have a Wes Craven cameo, which is solid because I know he was a producer here, and the amateur acting is forgivable given the low budget. Also, thought there'd be filmmaking aspects. In general, I would say that the cinematography and framing were good. They captured the isolated cabin well enough. It's wild that they go to like this Christmas Town place that Uncle Pete runs, especially because I covered this in December. That allows characters to move around a bit. The effects are limited, but this is more about building suspense. We do use this old technique to show somebody who might be possessed at one point. You're just kind of overlaying film on top of each other. Other than that, the soundtrack was fine without necessarily standing out. In conclusion, this is a low-budget psychological horror film that manages to find interesting ways to explore themes of guilt, trauma, and hidden secrets. Even while borrowing heavily from established genre tropes, the presence of Morty adds a unique, unnerving totem around which the escalating tensions revolves. The strong performance from Bose, Medway, and Heems helped to anchor the increasingly convoluted plot. Despite some continuity issues and moments where the narrative muddles its own internal logic, this succeeds in creating an isolated, paranoia-filled atmosphere. It is compelling, if flawed, revisit that proves to be an effective early 90s direct-to-video effort. So my rating here after the second watch actually came up quite a bit, I believe, from the last time I saw this. I gave this one a 6 out of 10 now. It's not as bad as I remembered. I'm going to go a little bit brief here with the next one because I've covered this previously. It's going to be Him. This is from 2025, directed by Justin Tipping, and then this was written by him as well as like Zach Akers and Skip Bronke. This stars Marlon Wayans, Tyreek Withers, and Julia Fox. This is a body horror football psychological sport film that is, I believe this is just from the United States, currently sitting on a 5.1 on IMDb and a 2.6 on Letterboxd, with the synopsis being a young athlete descends into the world of terror when he's invited to train with legendary champion whose charisma curdles into something darker. So this one, if you'd like to hear a feature review, is going to be episode 308, which was Voyage of the Fives, number 23. Had this paired up with Dead of Night. And so for this one here, we are following Cam. He is played by Withers. He's a star player and a potential top draft prospect who was a former walk-on. It's kind of interesting here that they didn't make him a 5-star high school prospect, but anyways, his drive is fueled by his mantra to be him, pushed by his late father, Cam Sr., portrayed by Don Benjamin. Now, the guilt over telling his father that he was quitting before his father passed, he seems to find a reason to succeed from within, not for necessarily others, or he needs to find that. That's kind of what the big thing is here, that his idol and currently mentor, Isaiah White, portrayed by Wayans, is trying to tell him. So we also have White here Isaiah in his corruption. He was Cam's hero, like I said, a legendary San Antonio Saviors quarterback. His methods to stay on top are described as intense and nearly illegal. With his mental state being borderline on psychotic, it really kind of just shows what you're trying to do here and what the lengths you have to go to stay on top like that. And there's also some brutal treatment of free agents. Wayne's performance here channels Patrick Bateman with a constant need to watch film, which I thought was kind of funny. Instead of returning like videotapes, that's what he's saying there. He struggles with retirement and training his potential successor. But there's also that kind of idea of, giving back to the people that helped you succeed type idea. So this uses horror genre tropes to explore bigger issues within the professional sports, like the signing of a contract depicting as signing one's soul over. So it's like a Faustian deal there. Elements are also kind of the corrupting, like we have these like rituals by cult members echoing like an Antichrist rise for the chosen one, which would be Cam. The team's mascot is a devil, which is kind of ironic because their team is the Saviors. There's a predatory nature here. Legacy shown as like ownership exploits newcomers, disguising abuse and ritualistic sacrifice as glory. Definitely kind of one of those things there where they'll throw away guys, cut people before and everything like that. You could also see these players as being like gladiators, risking injury, including like CTE for entertainment, displaying toxic masculinity to go along with that. Not necessarily killing them, but we also have hero worship, where we have the character of Marjorie, portrayed by Naomi Grossman. She leads an obsessed cult of groupies outside the compound, mirroring sports hero worship and religious devotion, which you can kind of see people that do tailgating where they dress up and have like wild costumes. Isaiah reinforces this by calling the field his church. Let's then look at some of the filmmaking and performance highlights for me. I think that the cinematography here is great, and the framing just kind of helps to build this surreal atmosphere, especially as Cam kind of goes down this thing where he doesn't know what's real and what's not. Got some good visual elements. I love the use of x-rays when characters clash and like hit. We're kind of seeing those internal injuries, healing or causing damage. And we also get to see with Cam as it's getting stronger. I thought Withers and Wayans excel as the leads. Fox as Elise White, Isaiah's wife, she has this weird mania that kind of goes on as we develop things. Tim Heidecker is enjoyable as Cam's agent Tom. He's just a wild dude in general here. So I do think there's some slight plot holes. They weren't as bad the second time around. There's a little bit of things that I originally was thinking, and then that got cleared up. I just think this has somewhat of a manic progression. I found this to be thought-provoking, and as somebody who's a huge football fan, that really kind of helped me to kind of connect with some of these things. Won't be necessarily for diehard football fans unless you're also a big horror fan. I think this is executed well enough. So I actually came up on my rating. I originally had a 7 on this one. I have now come in at an 8 out of 10. Not going to be a contender for my top 10. It's definitely going to be kind of hovering in that next section there, potentially on the lower end of that, but we shall see. Then I got to check out a screener here of Evidence of the Boogeyman. This is from 2025, directed by Calvin Maury McCarthy, who also co-wrote this with Tim Coyle. And then they both star in this together with Naomi Meacham Miller. This is a horror film from the United States. You're not able to rate it yet on IMDb, and there isn't a letterbox page as of yet, but our synopsis: a small film crew sets out to shoot a paranormal documentary at a farmhouse haunted by legend. What starts as a lighthearted project descends into terror when their footage reveals horrifying evidence that the boogeyman might be real. So this one I got the chance to see thanks to Lauren from Breaking Glass Pictures. There was a screener available, and I've enjoyed the 7th Street Productions features that I've seen thus far. So it helps that director, co-writer, and star here of McCarthy is in a horror movie podcast group, the 22 Shots of Moods and Horror. He's been on their podcast. So I'm in there. We haven't really interacted, but I like to help to get the word out about low-budget horror like this for my 2025 horror list. So I was like, yeah, let's go ahead, give this a watch, give this a review, everything like that. So that's what I'm doing here. So I'm going to go ahead and start by saying this doesn't have the deepest story. That's not to say, I'm not meaning that as a slight, though. It isn't, we're getting a common storyline for found footage movies like this. It isn't necessarily doing anything new or different. What I will give credit to, though, is the production team are kind of sticking with developing this boogeyman entity. So I've previously seen Revenge of the Boogeyman. And I know there's one other one out there, which is Beware of the Boogeyman. Now that I set up, I did enjoy this isolated setting. We're in the woods with a cabin. That was an easy way to kind of build tension and atmosphere. Going with the found footage filming style does help there as well. It makes it where you can't just easily get away. They're far enough, outside of town. There's that added element that if you wander off into the woods, you are taken. That comes back into play later to build the horror as well. Since the story is thin, this one is successful with its creepy filmmaking. Effective camera work and character reactions build atmosphere for jump scares without relying on music stingers. Notable sound design, especially with recorded yelling, is a highlight, and how that kind of plays back in later. But the glimpses of the boogeyman and the eerie darkness surrounding Jim, who's portrayed by Jim Spence, he's the guy that owns the property that they're on and everything. There's some other people that we also get with that are unsettling. Ultimately, the familiar techniques lacked originality and failed to kind of maintain engagement, which I do hate to kind of come down hard on. So that'll take us over to the acting, which succeeds despite its low budget, as the cast is pretty much playing self-caricatures. So our director is actually playing Kelvin in this one, McCarthy that is, and he's a little bit sleazy, but it's reciprocated that the character of Naomi is actually notable, that she's actually flirting back with him. She's portrayed by Meacham Miller. I think both of them are pretty solid. Something I want to give credit here to is Naomi, as she is the on-screen personality for this documentary that they're making inside the world of the movie. She's not very good on camera, and I love that Kelvin is kind of gassing her up, acting like that she is. She also gets nude in this, if that's something that you are curious about. And then I would also say that Tim Coyle and Eric Skyback are playing pretty much themselves in this one. They are behind the camera people that are working with McCarthy, and I think they do some good stuff there. I like how they're actually kind of concerned when things start to kind of hit the fan that they want to get out of there, but they also want to make sure everybody gets out safe. Jason Brooks is in this as Officer Derek Olson. We get to see him as everything is framed here by Alyssa Hall portraying herself, where she is saying that this footage was found, she edited it together, and then Brooks was the actual officer that showed up on site first. So I think that framing is nice with the Hall character, and then Spence is kind of an oddball owner. He's good in that. And whoever is the boogeyman has imposing size, and that enhances the effect. So in conclusion, this is a serviceable found footage horror film that successfully leverages its isolated setting and low budget constraints. While it doesn't reinvent the wheel in terms of plot or execution, the dedication to building a cohesive boogeyman mythology and the use of effective sound design create some genuinely unsettling moments. The cast delivers performances that fit the tone, helping to carry the familiar narrative beats. For fans of low-budget horror and the 7th Street production style, this one offers a chilling, albeit predictable, addition to the subgenre, ultimately succeeding through the atmosphere rather than originality. So my rating here for Evidence of the Boogeyman, I'm going to give this one a 6 out of 10. And this, I believe, is on the Roku channel as of now. Keep an eye out, though, for it to hit other places as well. And then my last feature before I get over to a documentary is going to be Sinners. This is from here in 2025. This is written and directed by Ryan Coogler, stars Michael B. Jordan, Jack O'Connell, and Haley Steinfeld. This is a folk horror, period drama, supernatural action music thriller film that is a co-production between the United States, Australia, and Canada. Currently sitting on a 7.6 on IMDb and a 4.1 on Letterboxd, with our synopsis here being: twin brothers return to their hometown intending to leave their troubled lives behind and start fresh, but they discover a great evil awaiting them. And those two brothers are going to be Smoke and Stack, both being portrayed by Michael B. Jordan. So if you'd like to hear a featured review, I'm going to go ahead and direct you back over to episode 290, which was Voyage to the Fives number 9, that featured One Frightened Night, and of course this movie here. But what I'm going to go ahead and do is jump into here. This one will be a little bit lighter just because I have covered this already, but the setting is 1930s South, post-slavery, during the Jim Crow era. We start at the end with a character clutching a guitar head before jumping back to the day prior, and that character is going to be Preacher Boy's his nickname. His real name is going to be Sammy Moore, portrayed by Miles Canton. And so that is the son of Jedediah, portrayed by Saul Williams. Now, a preacher who disapproves of Sammy's plans for the night, and then Sammy's cousins, the twin brothers Smoke and Stack, have returned to town. They fought in World War I, worked with gangsters like Al Capone in Chicago before deciding to come home to buy a former mill from Hogwood, portrayed by Dave Maldonado, and to turn it into like a nightclub juke joint type thing. So Stack faces complications when Mary, portrayed by Seinfeld, an old acquaintance, returns. Smoke tries to work to reconcile a little bit with his former lover and mother of his child, who is Annie, portrayed by Wenhui Moscow, after abandoning her following the loss of their child. So the twins hire Grace, portrayed by Lee Jun Lee, and Bo Chow, portrayed by Yao, for food and a sign. There's also Delta Slim, portrayed by Delroy Lindo, for music, and Cornbread, portrayed by Omar Benson Miller, for security. But then there's a complication here. We have Remick, portrayed by Jack O'Connell, who's a charismatic villain being chased by Choctaw American Indians, finding sanctuary with KKK members. Bert, portrayed by Peter Drymanis, and Joan by Lola Kirk. And then the brothers' biblical names are Elias and Elijah, something to kind of keep in mind here, that there is religion as an undercurrent. So the central conflict begins as Preacher Boy's exceptional musical talent attracts evil spirits, drawing Remick and his cohorts to the juke joint. So then for themes and genres here, this is a period drama that transforms into a creature feature horror film. So some of the things that we're getting here, and this is what some of the stuff I think turned some people off, but we have like racism and oppression evident through the Jim Crow setting. The twins fear the KKK, but I mean, they're willing to fight back, so keep that in mind. But the monster has an allegory for oppression and colonialism. The black-owned blues club practices clear segregation, excluding Remick's crew. Kind of a different way you look at it, because usually it's not the way that it has played out. So religion, Sammy the preacher's son resists his father's call to abandon sinners at the juke joint. The twins aim to create a haven for their community to relax in. This creates issues here since they want to use credit from the plantation. Now, music being the power as like a central, offering wisdom, connecting generations, and helping to break generational trauma. So for me, strengths, this is masterfully blending a compelling 1930s period drama with a sinister creature feature, successfully sets up the characters and their plight before transitioning into horror, features excellent acting, noting, Jordan here having, dual performances as probably his best performance I've ever seen from him. The use of music is great, building atmosphere and capturing the vibe. Includes a must-see cinematic musical sequence with diverse, global dancers that demands a theater viewing, which, tough to do now, but I loved seeing that in the theater. So for me, I got to see this originally at the Gateway Film Center on the big screen, and I know I have this on 4K, which I have received as an early Christmas present. That's what Jamie and I finally watched it on. And my rating here, I absolutely love this. First time I'm doing this in quite a few years. I give Sinners now a 10 out of 10. There's just so much in it, and it really just kind of resonated with me this time around. And I have a documentary here of Dawn of the Dogman from 2025. This is another small town monsters one that was written and directed by Seth Breedlove. It features Lyle Blackburn as our narrator, Steve Cook, and Bigfoot Michigan Bob. So this is an adventure documentary thriller from the United States. Not enough ratings on either of them. I would say that over on Letterboxd, so this is hovering between like a 2 to like a 4-star movie over there, with our synopsis being a retrospective tales of the Dogman in the state of Michigan. So another documentary from Small Town Monsters. Like I said, Justin Cook reached out with the screener. I was interested because I've just seen so many of these. I'm just going to keep rolling every time they get offered. So this is a more in-depth look at the Dogman cryptid that was claimed to have been seen in Michigan. As somebody who was born and raised in that state, I was intrigued. Other than that information, I did come into this one blind. So we actually start, this is told in I think like 10 chapters. The first one is with this radio host named Steve Cook, who was back in the 80s, wrote a song about the Dogman and played it. This turned out to be an April Fool's joke that took off. There were people who started calling in, stating that they have seen this entity that he was referring to. So there is a story here that gets introduced before all that. It was back when Michigan was still unsettled. The tale was eerily similar to kind of the part of Mary Shelley's Book of Frankenstein, where on the wedding night of a couple, there was a beast that took the bride. There's just one tale that went back to, there's tales that go back to the logging days as well, where people are seeing like a dog-like creature that would walk on its hind legs, said to stand like 6 to 7 feet tall. These sightings have never truly stopped, so it's interesting that the lore goes back that far. Over the rest of the chapters, we hear from people who have claimed to seen the cryptid. We also hear from different experts on it. What makes this hold weight for me is the fact that there are a couple of women who are compiling information, they're vetting it and doing scientific approach. Do I fully believe in the Dogman roaming Michigan or other states? Not necessarily. I don't have a way of refuting the stories, so that's where I'm kind of sitting with what is presented here. Let me then shift gears by stating that when Breedlove and like Small Town Monsters, when they do their work, they're allowing people to just be kind of interviewed, tell their story. They're not trying to convince the viewer if they're real or not. What they're doing is presenting the evidence and allowing us to make a decision. It is leaning more towards what we're hearing as being real, but not pushing too hard is a good touch in my opinion. I also think that we get a good cross-section of people who tell their stories about the cryptid as well. What makes this documentary work as well is it's professionally made. The cinematography and framing look good. I love that we're using these people who are talking, but not only the focus there. They use computers, and I'm guessing now AI, to help bring these things to life, keeps it fresh, and because there's no actual footage of the stories, or even the ones in the past, and kind of creating images to help show what they're saying. It's a good touch in my opinion. Other than that, I do think the sound design and music was good, especially the song that Cook wrote, as we get an idea of it now. In conclusion, this is another compelling addition to the Small Town Monsters catalog by presenting a deep dive into the Michigan Dogman lore with its eerie historical roots in the unsettled logging days to the modern day sightings galvanized by an April Fool's joke. The film allows the viewer to grapple with mysteries themselves. The professional production value coupled with the varied perspectives of witnesses and experts results in a well-rounded and engaging documentary that successfully explores the enduring appeal of this cryptid without insisting on belief. For fans of cryptid documentaries, especially those unfamiliar with the Michigan Dogman, this film is an enjoyable and thought-provoking watch. So my rating here, like I said, rather enjoyed this. I give this a 7 out of 10, and this should be on streaming now. And that's all I have here for mini reviews. Let me go ahead and get you over to the trailer of my first featured review.
This showed up on my porch this morning addressed to you.
Night of the Reaper.
It's so great to see you back in town.
I really appreciate you helping out tonight.
Hey, Max.
Hello, Dina.
Let's play hide and seek. Are you downstairs? Are you in the dining room? Hey, Max. Are you outside?
You're showing us this for a reason. There's a clue somewhere.
What's this?
That's the basement. We don't go down there anymore.
Now it's freaking me out. Max?
Yeah, that place can give me the creeps.
Kiddo? Are you messing with me?
None of this is a coincidence, Butch. Not today.
Willis, what did you do?
Night of the Reaper, huh? Kinda catchy.
And for my first featured review here is going to be Night of the Reaper. This is from 2025. It was co-written and directed by Brandon Christensen, and then Ryan Christensen wrote it with him. This is starring Jessica Clement, Ryan Robbins, and Summer H. Howell. While we also have here Keegan, Connor Tracy, Maddie Finiocho, I think about how you say that name, Max Christensen, Ben Cockle, David Feehan, Bryn Samuel, Savannah Miller, Susan Serro, Huxley Fisher, Isla Spencer, Sophie Kane, Deborah Ferguson, Blair Young, Jocelyn Chug, and Lonnie Olson. So this here is a B-horror slasher holiday horror. Didn't actually realize this is, I think, technically right around the Halloween time, but this is from the United States. Currently sitting on a 5.9 on IMDb and a 2.8 on Letterboxd, with our synopsis being: college student Dina visits home and is roped into babysitting. The local sheriff is mailed a piece of evidence and is led on a scavenger hunt to reveal a serial killer. So this is one that went on my list of films to check out for 2025. When it hit, there were things in the theater, so it went on the back burner. Now that I was able to do a bit of catch-up when compiling my end-of-year list, I didn't want to skip this one. My buddy Tony pointed out that the director here, Christensen, had a movie hit at Nightmares Film Festival this year of Body Cam, and that intrigued me even more because I dug that film. So let me do some featured notes on before I jump into the movie, and I'll start with our director here once again of Christensen. He's helmed 6 features and 2 shorts. I've seen 4 of his works. Actually, I've seen 2 of what he's done at Nightmares Film Festival. All in genre, I've seen this, Z, Stillborn, and Body Cam. I've not seen Superhost or The Puppet Man as of right now. Then as a writer, he has 6 movies and 1 short. They're all the same that he's directed. And then Ryan Christensen, I'm assuming that they're related, either brothers or I'm not sure if Ryan is a male or female, so I'm just going to leave that there. But they've written with Brandon on 3 works. I've seen this in Body Cam, but I'm missing The Puppet Man. Then to the cast, Clement has been in 15 films and 3 shorts. I've seen 2, both in horror, with this and A Christmas Horror Story. I have not seen Letters to Satan Claus. Her co-star is Robbins. He's been in 47 motion pictures and 6 shorts. I've seen him in 4 things. Not horror would be The Seventh Son. That one I think kind of borderlined on like supernatural type stuff, and I know it was kind of like a period piece where it's set in like medieval times, but been a long time. Has 5 in genre. I've seen 3. That would be this, AVP Requiem, and Apollo 18. I've not seen Vampire or Wrecked. Last one I'll look at is Howl. She's been in 14 features. I've seen her in 5, all in horror as she has 10. I've seen Curse, Cult, and Doc of Chucky, as well as The Midnight Man. I've not seen Time Cut, Hunter x Hunter, or All Fun and Games as like the top 3 that I am missing currently. All right, then, let's jump in the movie, and we start with a babysitter of Emily Golding, portrayed by Howl, as she's watching Marina, portrayed by Spencer, and Mark, portrayed by Fisher. Mark is afraid of a skinwalker monster in his closet, and he's soothed when Emily convinces Marina to stay with him. Now, Emily goes downstairs to sneak a smoke, a drink, and a dance with watching MTV, which I thought was kind of a good touch there, until the garage door opens. When she checks, no one is there. She blames the strange movements on the children, unaware of a more terrifying presence. We then shift into the future a bit. This is taking place in the 1980s. Dina is back in town like the synopsis said. Things are off with her family. I don't know if I ever said, but Dina is portrayed by Clement. But things are off with her family, like I was saying, and it feels like she's avoiding going home. She does pick up medicine for her father's heart. She is then scared by Chad, portrayed by Cockle, and he comes out of his van. Now, he's scolded by his friend of Willis Hanover, portrayed by Samuel. Now, Dina then goes to visit her friend of Hattie, portrayed by Miller. This then shifts over to meeting the sheriff here, Rodney Arnold, portrayed by Robbins. What we'll learn fairly recently is that his wife died in a car accident. He has a son, Max, portrayed by Max Christensen, who Hadley is supposed to be watching that night. Rodney gets an odd item delivered to his house. It's a box, but inside of it's a garage door opener. He's riding around with his deputy of Butch Cassidy, which I realized when I was writing my review that is kind of funny that that's what they named him, who is portrayed by Finocchio, or I think that might be how you say that. If not, I do apologize. What they learn is that this goes to the house from the cold open. This isn't the last package that he gets either. Now, there's another one that he'll get when he gets to work. That lady gets it from, it's addressed to him, but it's sent to her, and she's Dottie, portrayed by Sophie Kane. So then, that night, things take a turn. Hadley calls Dina, asking if she can watch Max. She has a stomach bug and is afraid that if Rodney finds someone else, she'll lose the job going forward because she doesn't think she's very good at what she does. Dina isn't thrilled, but agrees to help her friend. Max and her do know each other. It isn't also that big of a deal to Rodney. The night goes smooth until Dina sees a figure outside. The more evidence Rodney finds, the more unhinged he gets, especially when it points that maybe his wife's death might not have been the accident that he thought, or that everybody did. Not everything is as it seems, though. So that's really my recap of the characters. The film's setting in a common time period risks fatigue, and that would be like in the 1980s. We're doing this like nostalgic throwback. I think this handles it well. We have like standard ad placement, along with like the focus on corded phones. There's like a VHS filter. I think it's at times an interesting stylistic choice, especially when we come out of the credits and it's like VHS quality and then it shifts over to more just like a polish what you'd see today with like digital. It does get a little bit confusing as there's this element where our killer has filmed their crimes and also the character of Chad walks around with a camera. It made me pause because sometimes it doesn't necessarily fit and it's following like the established setting. It makes me realize, I had to figure out when at times it was a filler and when at times it wasn't. Otherwise, this successfully captures the time period in my opinion. Now that I have it set up, I thought the cold open does well in setting the stage. We have that classic babysitter with the children motif that, is an urban legend. You also have things like When a Stranger Calls. This is the first real crime that rocks the city from what we're kind of gathering. It's through the investigation of the clues that Sheriff Arnold seems that there's some things more connected here than originally thought. Some deaths were ruled like an accident, and that actually might not be the case. There is more to that thread that feels underdeveloped. I understand why to an extent, but I also think there's some things that we're missing as well from that cold open. Let's then look at our lead character of Dina. She's an interesting one who got out of her small town. There are multiple characters who make reference to it. Hattie's a little bit jealous of it, but she knows she's not as smart. She doesn't necessarily have the ambition either. Chad is shocked. She might have a history with Willis. The only thing I find odd is that all these supporting characters seem like they're still in high school. It is plausible, or at least some of them were still in high school, but it just felt a little bit odd. Regardless, I like how they established Dina as being good enough to get out. Clement does well in bringing that character to life on top of it. The more interesting character, for the most part, though, is Sheriff Rodney Arnold. He seems like a good guy. I love that we get this baseline. These packages he's getting make him angrier as more evidence comes forward. He goes into a rage with one reveal, and then from there he's on a rampage. He's convinced that Chad and in turn Willis are involved. Part of that being that Chad always has a video camera on him, so finding these like VHS tapes makes sense. Robbins does a great job in his portrayal. I felt bad for his character, but flying off the handle makes him a little bit reckless, especially as a law enforcement officer. Then let's go ahead and shift over to the rest of the story. How it unfolds isn't necessarily what I expected. I figured this was going to be a slasher, but there are elements there. It starts, though, with a variation on the babysitter urban legend, like I said. It then shifts into a home invasion. Then it's more of like an overarching mystery as Sheriff Arnold tries to solve the case while Dina is stalked. We then get a shift that I'm not going to delve any farther in to avoid spoilers. Before I shift away from the story completely, though, there's some themes that I don't necessarily know if I explicitly covered already. Revenge, that one is kind of clear, but it's been brought up through Rodney. We also see that Dina later, which was good. Through this motivated through like grief and trauma, that's kind of what is pushing things there. There's an interesting byproduct there where Sheriff Arnold and his treatment of the two young men who he believes are involved. I'll bring up then, we have to have a subversion of genre tropes, which I enjoyed. Nostalgia is a major factor there as well. Let's then go over and discuss the rest of the acting performances. Clement and Robbins effectively carry this as distinct characters with opposing approaches to the night's events, which I appreciated. Howell, Fisher, and Spencer perform well in the cold open. Tracy is an interesting reoccurring character. We actually find her, I think she works for like the national parks or something, like she's a ranger, and we see her cleaning up some roadkill, and she says she has a spot where she buries it, and then she kind of pops up a few different times throughout from there. I would say that Finocchio, Cockle, Samuel, and Miller all work in their roles. Little Max Christensen delivered what he was needed for, and the special credit goes to Feehan as being the person inside of the Reaper costume. So also up for a little bit of trivia is I don't love the VHS filter. It also doesn't ruin things. It's a good touch, though, right after the cold open. I do think the cinematography and frame were solid. The limited effects that we get are good. This is less of a slasher and more of like a murder mystery, so that makes sense. Other than that, I do love the musical selections. It feels of the era, which helps to bring it to life without being over the top. And then, like I said, the product placements, technology, and outfits used, capturing the era isn't as good as other things, but still kind of works for what they needed there. So there is one bit of trivia here for sure is that I know in a drugstore and I believe at somebody's house there are some VHSs that you see as a camera pans over to them. One of them is Superhost, which is another Christensen movie. So there's also something that's in the spoiler section that I'm not going to go ahead and go into, but it does involve a walkie-talkie or like a two-way radio, so I'll just leave that there. But in conclusion, this is a surprisingly effective film that subverts expectations by shifting from a traditional slasher setup to a compelling murder mystery and anchored by strong performances from Clement and Robbins. While the stylistic choice of the VHS filter may be debatable, the movie successfully uses its 1980s setting to enhance themes of grief, trauma, and revenge. Christensen crafts a taut narrative with satisfying twists, making them more than just a nostalgic horror entry and a worthwhile watch for those who appreciate genre-bending and character-driven suspense. So my rating here for Night of the Reaper, I gave this one a 7 out of 10. I would recommend it. This is streaming on Shudder. So I'm not going to do a spoiler section. I don't think there's necessarily anything deeper I need to delve into there without just, flat out spoiling the movie. So let me go ahead and get you over to the trailer of my second featured review.
Coming soon from AIP Home Video. Demon Possessed. 3 college couples take a snowmobiling break in a remote Northwoods location.
Ooh, some tough guy.
After a drag race ends abruptly in a crash. They search for shelter, finding a boarded-up children's camp, once run by a murderous religious order.
Keep the beast in the field. When the Bible says the beast, it means the devil.
And an innocent game with an ancient Ouija board activates the demonic spirit of the camp, which possesses the injured student.
again if the killer isn't put away.
One by one, the students succumb to the demon's fiendishly original mayhem. Unleashing the horror of a night of murder.
Please, no!
It's going to be a cold day in hell. Demon Possessed. Coming soon from AIP Home Video.
And for my second feature review here is going to be The Chill Factor from 1993, directed by Christopher Webster, and it was written by Julianne Weaver. This stars Dawn Laurie, Aaron Kinginas, and Connie Snyder, while also featuring here David Fields, Eve Montgomery, Jim Cagle, Becky Vallon, Mark Armstrong, Chuck Decker, Ron Hallnagel, Jim Gresh, and Barbara Clamon. So this is a supernatural horror film that is from the United States. It is currently sitting on a 4.0 on IMDb and a 2.1 on Letterboxd, or a synopsis. A group of snowmobilers become trapped on a lake and have to hole up in an abandoned camp once used by a religious group. So this is one that I learned about either through a podcast or a documentary, because it's on my list of movies to see at some point. So from there, I'm kind of gathering that this was an independent film that would be considered like regionally made. Other than knowing that it took place in the winter, I came into this one blind. And let me do some feature notes. This is going to be very short. And this is the only work of our director, Webster. Now, Weaver did writing on 2 credits. The other one is something else I haven't seen, but the cool poster of Trapped Alive from 1988. Now, for Laurie and Snyder, this is their only credit. And then I'll look at Kinginas, who has been in 3 films. I've seen 2. Not horror. He was in Untamed Heart. I don't remember anything about it, but according to Letterboxd, I've seen this one. Now, I did one other one in genre with Astonished from 1988. So then, let's jump in the movie here, and we start off with some voiceover narration from Janine. So the character's portrayed by Laurie, but then the older version that does the voiceover is Clamon. So what we're seeing is a couple of snowmobiles and Janine talking about when she was younger. Now, she had a nightmare about this event and how things progressed towards it, and no matter what she was kind of doing, she couldn't stop it. It then shifts over to meeting our group as they snowmobile to a bar. We have Janine, who is with Tom, portrayed by Kinginas. I think they might be engaged. With them is his sister Karen, portrayed by Snyder. Now, they seem to be a little bit too close. Now, she is seeing Chris, who's portrayed by Fields. He's a medical student, and his birthday is upcoming. He butts heads with Tom as they're constantly competing. We also have Lissa, portrayed by Montgomery, and Rod, is portrayed by Cagle. Now, he's a football player who's been invited to the Minnesota Vikings training camp. That is the pro team. Now, the group meets the owner of the bar, Bessie, portrayed by Vallon. Now, Chris and Tom are debating who would win in a race on snowmobiles. The former is convinced that over distance he'll win, where Tom believes with the modifications that he's made, his will win speed. Bessie tells him of a frozen area on Blackfriar Lake where this could be decided. This doesn't seem like a good idea, especially because the weather is kind of turning, and she even warns them that if the weather starts to get bad, that they need to turn around and come back immediately. But anyway, she does give them a map to where they're going. It is from here that we see Janine's nightmare play out. Tom is flung from his snowmobile and hits his head on a tree. Now, they have to either find a way back to town or somewhere to warm up as he's unconscious. That's when they find this abandoned cabin. Chris gives him medical treatment. Ron decides he'll go into town for help. Everyone else looks for supplies and to start a fire. While they're searching, Karen finds a box of items. Inside of it is a variation like a Ouija board called the Devil's Eye. Now, there's an arrow with an eye on it in the middle, and Janine seems to kind of know how it works, which is kind of weird, even though she doesn't think it's a good idea. Now, Tom is bleeding, which seems to be a sacrifice as they do this ritual. There's a dark entity with them that has an open vessel with this hurt guy, and Janine's nightmare slowly becomes a reality. So that's where I'll leave my recap and introduction of the character. I want to start is that this isn't working with the largest budget. It has some flaws while also having charm. What I love is the setting. Being where we have these people riding snowmobiles, getting stranded at this remote cabin is a good touch. Then having one of the guys get injured raises the stakes. If they don't get back to town, or if somebody doesn't get him or take care of him to the point, he's going to end up passing away. Now, the elements are unforgiving. Then given this place is a history, these are all things that are a recipe for working, even though it's not original. Delving more into what we get here, I love this idea of being a religious camp. They have this image from the 1950s with an odd phrase from the Bible. It's a picture of the people who were at the camp, and then there's a Bible verse is the beast in the fields. Now, our group tries to figure out what kind of sect of Christianity ran this place. I believe they come up with it's probably the Dominicans because of the lake being called Black Friar. The deeper they dig, it turns out it might be something darker. I'm a sucker for that. This doesn't get fleshed out as much as it could, though, so that's kind of the only really big drawback I have there. Then that will take me over to another issue that I have with the writing here isn't great. The character dialogue is a little bit stiff. It doesn't fully make sense at times either. It feels like the writers were too concerned with getting certain things said or what they thought was funny. It doesn't necessarily feel natural. Now, the actors were probably amateur as well, so it doesn't help. So, I mean, the trivia that I found is that for Laurie, Snyder, and Montgomery, this is their only ever acting credit. They were all fine. I would also say that Fields was kind of along with them. Kanjanis was, he's given a little bit more to work with things as they play out. It's kind of funny because he's the one who's supposed to be in a coma, and yeah. But Cagle, he brings good size for his role, so it makes me wonder, did he actually play football? Maybe not professionally, but looks like he might have played at a higher level. So the rest were servable aside from what was said. The only other thing to bring up would be relationship and sexual tension. This is a supernatural horror film, but it does kind of play with slasher tropes. There's an odd dynamic here with Tom and Karen flirting when they're supposed to be siblings. Chris and Janine notice it. There's also characters here who will kiss and then they get called out for potentially turning on other characters. It kind of feels like it wanted to almost go a little bit more erotic. My guess is because a lot of these people here are amateur actors, probably didn't want to do any nudity on, have that be the only thing that's kind of lasting from their acting career. Don't blame them, probably weren't getting paid enough, but the supernatural elements does factor in here. It just needs a little bit more fleshing out to fully work. Let's then go over to the filmmaking aspects. I've already said that I love the setting, both the isolated cabin and the snowy exteriors. How they capture that along with the action sequences and the snowmobiles were good. Something else solid here were the effects. They were practical. There's some limited by the budget, but the blood we see is good. There were more subdued elements with the supernatural that surprised me. We get a variety of interesting kills. Other than that, the soundtrack didn't necessarily stand out or hurt the film. So in conclusion, this is a fascinating, if flawed, regional independent film. It succeeds admirably in establishing a compelling, isolated setting and raising the stakes with the immediate injury of a main character. While the execution is hampered by stiff writing, awkward dialogue, and likely amateur performances, this possesses a distinct charm, especially in the use of practical effects and interesting supernatural elements blended with slasher trope. Though it doesn't fully develop the dark history of the religious camp or resolve all the strange character dynamics, it remains a worthwhile watch for fans of low-budget regional horror looking for an engaging winter set tale that prioritizes atmosphere and intriguing premise over polish. So my rating here for the chill factor, I gave this one a 5 out of 10. This is streaming on Tubi if you are curious. I'm not going to do a spoiler section. There's not anything I necessarily need to delve anything deeper into. So let me go ahead then and get you over to one last break before I close out the show.
Pod Nation TV has you beamed up with Out of This World award-winning podcast, found exclusively on Pod Nation TV. Download Pod Nation TV for Roku and Fire TV. Pod Nation TV, Out of This World.
It had been a
and
wonderful
welcome
evening.
back. So if you'd like to send me any sort of feedback, anything you want read on the show, or any screener requests, anything like that, you can send those to journeywithacinephile@gmail.com. If you'd like to read any of my written reviews or see any of the old past podcast episodes, all of that is being stored over at Journey with a Cinephile. That is my blog, and that's going to be horrorreview.webnode.com. If you'd like to follow me and become friends on Facebook, it's going to be David Garrett Jr. is my name over on there. There's going to be a link in the show notes. And then if you'd like to follow me on Twitter, it's going to be Buckeye from Mish. And then if you'd like to follow my Letterboxd page where I have all of my reviews, whether that is going to be horror or non-horror, that's going to be David OSU is my name on that. Instagram and Threads, I'm David OSU87. Over on my personal Instagram page, you might see some of my family stuff every now and then whenever I remember to post something. My wife is much better at it than I am. But then if you'd like to follow the Journey with a Cinephile Instagram, that's going to be Journey with a Cinephile, all one word. And then also direct you, if you'd like, to the Discord channel. That's going to be the Nightclub Discord, but I have a page over there. And there's also some other great pages of other shows and them kind of messing around and everything like that. Do highly recommend if you want to go ahead and check that out. And then the last thing I'll actually say here, if you would like to listen to the show a day early, this is always going to be streaming over there on the Pod Nation TV app. So I will have, once again, a link in the show notes for that if that is something that you're interested in. So yeah, there's some great stuff here. There's some great shows on some of these other networks and stuff. I highly recommend checking them out. And then for my next episode, it's going to be another one of these winter year-end, but technically it's also going to be my Christmas episode, is I'm in the process of watching Hosts. I know this takes place, I believe, on Christmas Eve from the parts that I've already seen so far. And then I'm going to try to get to the Gateway Film Center to check out the new Silent Night, Deadly Night. Everything should work out here eventually. It's either I'm going to watch it during the weekend or I'll go see it during the week. Either way, I'll have that on there. And then my Voyage to the Fives rewatch is going to be Day of the Beast. I'm also going to try to see if I can fit in Better Watch Out as a mini review as well. We'll kind of see how my time works out here, because I might go see Quentin Tarantino's The Whole Bloody Affair of Kill Bill, but we shall see if I can, set aside that much time. Other than that, I'll have more mini reviews and everything like that, but I don't think there's anything else I need to say here except that wraps up this episode of Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of horror cinema. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow along for more deep dives into the macabre. Until next time, keep watching horror, and remember, fear is just a frame away.